Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4. We get to talk about something super cool today, and that is what is enlightenment. This is going to be a little less about, well, the term is it's called history of ideas, where we're going to talk about sort of these ideas, what they sort of mean, and where they come from. We've been really talking about enlightenment this whole class, this whole course. The scientific revolution is sort of the beginnings of the Enlightenment. It just really comes into in like the 1700s, I should say, the 18th century, the 1700s, is where they start to see this as a movement, as opposed to it just being a thing that we can sort of look back in hindsight and say is happening. So um, let's get after it. Let's talk about the leading ideas of the Enlightenment, just sort of the main things to think about when we're thinking about this. So we're going to start with reason. That's going to be the key thing. If you remember nothing else about the Enlightenment, think about reason. So if I asked you what makes a human being, like what is it amount? Like I get that we're organisms, we're animals, we're all this kind of stuff. Like what makes us human? Um, And the answer that came from that came through the Enlightenment, that also, by the way, is still the answer that we give today, is reason. Reason is the central attribute of human beings. And just think about this: like even the rights that you have are determined by reason. So, for example, you get the right to vote at age 18. Why don't you get the right to vote at age 17? The answer is because we have essentially said that you don't really come into your own use of reason. There's still faultiness in your use of reason as a child, but as an adult, you have the ability to use reason. And we're going to call that adulthood 18. And so again, the use of reason is the key thing, which is why we put such an emphasis on education. Like when you're educated, you are better able to use your reason. That's the whole idea. Now, okay, so what exactly is reason then? Reason is essentially two things. It's correct thinking and correct acting. Now, correct it's a tricky word. It's correct as defined by reason. So it is very self-fulfilling in this sort of way, but that's the idea. That you not only are you able to sort of think correctly, but that you're able to translate that into action. To use reason is to be human, and vice versa. To be human is to use reason. Somebody who does not use their reason forfeits sort of their rights to be a human being, in a sense. Let me just clarify what I mean by that. Let's say that you go out and you decide to commit a crime. So you have used your reason, and your reason told you to go commit a crime. Clearly, you're having problems using your reason. Clearly, you don't have all the same rights as a human being does, so we're going to lock you up in jail. Once we've shown that you've committed this crime, you need to go to jail. You don't have the same rights as somebody who uses their reason correctly. That becomes sort of the whole thing that society is really built around. So reason as opposed to what? Reason is usually set against, for example, ignorance is one key thing. But it's also, if we go back to sort of ancient Greece and you remember your Plato, when Plato's talking about reason, he's contrasting it not so much with ignorance, but with things like passions and emotions. You have to avoid allowing your passions and your emotions to rule. You have to be ruled by sort of, I guess you could say it in a different way, cold logic, reason. Now, a part of this is that then there's the longer conversation of this is some people are more susceptible to turning to their passions and their emotions than their reason than others. That's going to be part of this ongoing conversation. So when we're talking about this back in the 1700s, you'll note that who has the ability to sort of vote, who is believed to be able to use their reason back in the 1700s. And the answers are, for example, if you're poor, can you do that? No. If you're poor, you've basically demonstrated that you've made choices in your life that you really don't have access to your use of reason, or if you do, you've decided not to use it, and that's why you're poor, and therefore if we deny you, for example, the right to vote and some other rights, I guess you could say, things that require sort of being fully human, it's not a problem because you're clearly more susceptible to your passions and emotions. What about women? Yeah, it's another thing, right? Women are clearly more emotional than men. I mean, just look around, right? So women get put over here in this category, men get put in this category. When you talk about equality and women's rights next week with Dr. Peterson, you're going to see this idea pop up again and again, where it's essentially using this sort of very, I guess I want to say modern, or even the way we think about things, Enlightenment version. It still puts sort of women in the corner. Non-Europeans, so a racism to this whole idea. More susceptible to passions and emotions, can't use their reason. Now, it doesn't mean that these groups can't use their reason. They can. They just have to demonstrate they're able to use their reason before they're given the rights that go with that. And again, when we're saying this, I want to be clear about this line right here with that, is that if to use reason is to be human, and these groups, it is believed, don't use their reason, then are they human? And the answer is they're considered sort of less than human. They have the capability of becoming human, but clearly they're not. And so it justifies sort of a hierarchy, whether that's racism, sexism, or classism. Some people require external control by those who use their reason. So, for example, the husband or the father has control over the wife or the daughter. This is perfectly fine because this person uses their reason, which will help this person not only model what it's like to be good reason, to use reason, but also will control her passions. See how it works out? This is perfect. Now, what we're going to get with this, obviously, as we move forward, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but we're going to get this idea that this is going to kind of go away over time. Let me say it differently. We're going to believe this goes away over time. There is still sexism, there's still racism, there's still classism today, but they're considered less essential to the whole thing than essentially it was back then. And so, yeah. All right. One more idea before we go to another video is humans are naturally rational and good. This is another assumption from the Age of Enlightenment. So let me just go back really quick. Reason is a central attribute of humans. Humans are naturally rational and good. In other words, when you're born, you got this. You're ready to go. If you were just sort of left alone is not exactly the right thing, but if you were sort of able to develop without any negative influences on you, you would be good and you would be rational. And those two things are interconnected, right? How do I know how to be good? Because I use my reason. Human nature is changeable, though. Here's the problem, is that most of us aren't able to sort of just be naturally rational and good. One of the key things that's going to come out of the Enlightenment is this idea that bad institutions will screw this up. So we might think today, like, for example, if you're raised in a family or in a negative environment, that it's not a big surprise that you grow up unable to use your reason, I guess is the way to put that. But this is even a broader idea. It's just like, let's take Rousseau, for example. You don't read Rousseau today, but you will at some point. And like Rousseau's whole thing was that essentially government screws us up. There was this sort of, we created these things called governments, and now you put human beings in that, and it's not a big surprise that the person who pops out the other side of having lived under a government system is completely jacked up. And his famous line is, man is born free, humans are naturally rational and good, but everywhere he is in chains, subjected to these bad institutions all over the place. So Marx is going to take this a little bit further and say the bad institutions that really screw us up are going to be the economic ones like capitalism. Those things really screw us up. So if we can just make the institutions better, good institutions, then human beings under those institutions will be able to sort of react to this here. That's going to be a huge part of what we do today. Good education is a thing that can improve this condition. Now, again, this is a very sort of tough thing. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about what that means, but that's the general idea, is essentially the more educated you become, the more able you're able to use your reason, and the more good that you'll be. So the sort of punchline of this whole thing is that this is the story that we're telling in the 1700s about human beings. Then sort of what should we be doing? The answer is we must change humans, and the way we do that is by changing the human-made institutions to recover this natural state. So, for example, we might talk today about it's better for human beings to live under democracy than dictatorship. Freedom is going to allow people to embrace what it means to be fully human. Or back then we might talk about things like let's get rid of slavery, for example, so that humans can recover this natural state. Okay, so watch a little bit here. You're going to read a little bit from Diderot, but then you're going to watch a longer, it's a TED Talk from a guy named Steven Pinker, who you should know about Steven Pinker if you don't know about Steven Pinker. And then we're actually going to do the discussion, and Steven Pinker is going to be a big part of that, but we're going to come back and talk about that here in just a second.